Originally in Spanish, summer 2023. Yesterday you were commenting on how etheric beings always influence us telepathically, etc. But I wonder if they influence us from their perspective, from outside the game, with advice that would reflect their angle and the level of viewing things, or do they influence us in some way that is practical to solve the problem dilemma from the pure 3D avatar stance? Or two at a time? I know I am dividing here the interests between the avatar and my higher self, but they are different interests sometimes, as Mari also explained. As for the higher selves, they don't see themselves as something separate from the incarnate people. They are more of them, or aspects of them. There is not an I and a you there. We, incarnate people, are a direct manifestation of our higher selves. And we are also their ideas and stuff that they have to work on in order to move forward in their spiritual development. Yes, but as I mentioned above, they are different interests sometimes. Let's go deeper. It was explained by Mari as well. Our soul sometimes wants the situations that we here see as negative. So, having said that, would our higher self influence us, for example, towards the negative situation for us, just so it could benefit from it? From whose side of interest does it influence us? One can argue that, yes, but I rather see it as these negative situations are the imperfections that our higher self wants to remove or correct. That is, it doesn't want them, but they happen to be a coincidence of vibration, and that is why they take place. Our higher selves are not complete or perfect. They turn out to be just more people, but on a more expanded plane. I didn't understand that, sorry. What do you mean they want to correct and remove them? But for the higher self, a negative situation could be a positive event, couldn't it? Like, for example, when Mari mentioned a woman who lost her arm in Iraq. To us here, it seems negative, but it is what her higher self wanted. So, by influencing her avatar, that woman, is it possible that she guided her to that exact situation to lose her arm for its own interest only? Rather, I feel that the imperfections of her higher self and what she has yet to work on internally were what manifested that situation, not a desire of the higher self to make her suffer for its growth. Although I see that scenario as well.
Yes, it makes sense.
Imperfections? They are just people. Things you have to work on internally.
Of course, otherwise they would already be the source.
Well, but people who are much more expanded and supposedly seeing everything from higher level and from outside of duality. Even much more expanded, they still have stuff they have to work on. They are still people, but on other higher planes. You mean the higher self guides us into certain situations because it is also imperfect? No, rather our higher self also falls into those situations that the incarnate person doesn't want. and for the same reasons of lack of vision of that person. However, I'm still not clear on this. We have said that my higher self influences and guides me, but to clarify again, from whose interest level really? Just looking from its own level, perfect or not, or taking into account the level of the avatar? From its own interest, because it sees the incarnate person as part of itself, simply because it has a much more expanded perception. It sees no difference between itself as higher self and the incarnate person in a 3D. But that interest contradicts the avatar's interest sometimes, doesn't it? For example, Dusty wants to be with his girlfriend Cassandra. He wants to marry her. But his higher self wants to have a challenge here and puts Cassandra in a wheelchair because he wants Dusty to learn how to take care of people. Here we can see the discrepancy between the interests of Dusty avatar and his higher self. Not necessarily, because both can fall into the same traps and situations in life that they didn't want. Because the higher self's vision, although much more expanded, does not include all possibilities, or else it would be the source. Interesting point. But then, if it doesn't see the difference between itself and its 3D manifestation, it acts like the Federation. To not see the difference, is that a good thing?
I think it's absurd to desire those things if you know that they are not good. Why generate those experiences? And if you are closer to the source, you can share those experiences with the other souls telepathically and make them your own without living that.
Those kinds of situations do seem to be pre-planned from the other side. In a classic situation where the value of something differs back and forth between the spiritual and the physical world. Also, good point, Robert. If you can share experiences in the afterlife with telepathy, why live that with your avatars in life? And if our higher self does not take into account what we perceive below, it acts like the Federation then, imposing values from above only. Because although it does not see us as separate, neither does the Federation see us as separate, and we have said that this is not all that good. There is also a very important element to take into account here, which is that the so-called higher selves are not always aware that this is what they are. They react as a hive effect on a group of people with more or less like minds. As Mari explained, a starseed may be unknowingly influencing an entire community of people. As their values and thoughts of that community of people come from the starseed, at least to a good degree, we could say that the starseed is indeed the higher self of those people. Since one is not necessarily the higher self of a single person. That being is already very expanded, and it may or may not be incarnated as a normal person and look like a normal person. It is not just one higher self and that's it, with its effect on one person, but it is layered. There will be one higher self, but there are others higher up who are also that person in their progressively more expanded stages. It is a soup of frequencies. It is not just something simple as they tend to think on Earth, always simplifying everything. Yes, I understand it that way too. But that's what I was wondering, from which step they influence us. from all, to one extent or another, from all levels of spiritual development of the entities we are connected with. But if it is from all, I don't think Dusty's position below, from my example above, was taken into account very much, because he didn't want to have his wife in a wheelchair. He wanted to go swimming in the Pacific with her.
And if everyone is on the same frequency, they all want the same thing?
They do not necessarily want it, but they provoke it. Furthermore, you have to consider that in the case of accidents, they are usually caused by lower astral entities who desire the suffering of people because they eat that. It nourishes them. That is another factor. Although, again, the vibration of each person also determines whether or not it will be a match to what those lower astral entities want. But Tina, doesn't that remind you of the Federation a little bit? The way we are guided by our higher selves? I have never thought of this before. Yes, but what are you seeing? Expand, please. Guiding from the higher values only, basically. And we have said that we should also see 3D people as something separate with their own interests. You should act and help from any level, 3D included, because they are all one. Yaski once said that. You can't only act from the etheric side interest, because there is no physical and etheric. 3D interest is equally important. Yes, in that case there is a direct connection between Federation and higher selves. And as we have said before, and this is very annoying and controversial for many people on Earth, their equivalents are in space, in the Federation, being them from one point of view and not from another, from theirs on Earth. Yes, exactly. Just like higher selves, and thinking that only they have the most correct perspective. And that, we have said, was and is a mistake on the part of the Federation. Therefore, I see it as a bit of a mistake on the part of our higher selves as well. The problem is that although the etheric side sees the material side of an incarnation on Earth, the value it gives it is not the same, because it is more expanded. And this includes knowing the position of the incarnated person. Yes, but they influence us from that position where they think it is correct, while being down here, this position often changes. Do they take that into account? Do they take into account Dusty, who just wants to swim with his wife and doesn't want any lessons? They take it into account, but their position is dominated by Dusty's unconscious. They place another value on what he desires. What an incarnate person consciously desires is not as strong as what he manifests who he is, in Mari's words. They include Dusty's stance, but it does not carry enough weight from the stance of higher self understanding. It's like wanting to have an apple to eat, but in exchange for a big meal afterwards. So the immediate satisfaction doesn't matter, but the stronger and more satisfying outcome afterwards. That is, although what Dusty wants is good, and his higher self recognizes it as good, he knows that if he does not get what he wants, Dusty, the higher self itself, will get something better. In psychology, this is called delayed gratification and is associated with more mature or more understanding people because their goals are more complex and larger. Another example is to work today in order to have something better tomorrow, Or better to enjoy the afternoon eating nachos and watching a movie today. That is why the higher self does not desire the same as the person below. Thinking. Interesting, okay. This point about the unconscious is important. Okay, I think with what you said now I understood a little bit better all of a sudden. Higher self reads and acts from his unconscious, because it's that part of Dusty that manifests more than the conscious one. But I don't think Dusty will have anything better with his wife in a wheelchair than his original plan to swim in the Pacific. Only sometimes something better can come of it. From one point of view, but not from the more expanded one that we don't understand well. From our incarnate point of view, yes, it is, but not from theirs. That's the problem.
They go at different rhythms, Gosha. These are other preferences that don't fit in many cases with ours.
Yes, but then it is still an imposition, not to take into account the rhythm of where the avatar is. According to them, they do take it into account, but they don't see it the same. As I explained above, what the avatar wants is not always what is best for the avatar itself, from their point of view. Okay, and now, Tina, a personal, practical question. Have you ever felt that you were being guided, influenced by your higher self when you, from your own conscious side, wanted something else? How did you act as a result?
By allowing yourself to go with it. I don't think you have a choice.
And why let yourself be led by an imperfect self, as we said at the beginning?
Because in theory, you are being guided by your higher self, right?
Yes, it feels like a force that is pushing you to do something with a motivation and constancy that you don't even understand. Even if you are tired, you go on. That starts to look like it's coming from outside. I just allow myself to go with it. From some more expanded points of view, the decisions are not ours alone. Well, in my case, I also feel that way with this project, and I let myself go, but I don't find it contradictory to what I consciously want here. But my question is, what do you do if you strongly feel that you want something different? It is when one should stop to meditate and think about what to do from then on. And so, as Mari explains, it is when the person merges with his higher self, being so advanced that they are now the same, or at least with his immediate higher self, since everything is layered. A higher self is the inferior of others above. And I mean superior and inferior only in descriptive terms.